The lights of the airport shimmered like a constellation across the glass windows. Passengers bustled through the lounge, dragging designer luggage and clutching boarding passes. Among them was a young woman, hair tied in a loose braid, jeans worn at the knees, and a leather jacket slung across her shoulders. She looked like any ordinary traveler, except for the quiet intensity in her eyes. She had booked her ticket months ago, finally treating herself to a first-class seat after years of sacrifice. Years that most people in this lounge would never understand. She walked to the gate, heart steady, until a flight attendant intercepted her with a polite but firm smile. "I'm sorry, miss. First class is reserved for premium guests only. You'll need to step aside." Her brows furrowed. "I have a first-class ticket." She pulled it out, her voice steady but tinged with disbelief. The attendant glanced at it, then at her scuffed boots, her plain clothes, and smirked faintly. "There must be a mistake. Passengers in first class, dress appropriately. Please wait while we reassign your seat." A couple nearby whispered, chuckling under their breath. She heard the words, "Doesn't look like she belongs here." The woman clenched her jaw. For years, she had been told the same thing. She didn't look like the kind of person who carried medals for valor. She didn't look like someone who had spent nights in the dirt, watching over her brothers in silence. But she had been there. Every mission, every sacrifice. The attendant motioned her toward the economy line. "This way, miss. We'll get you settled." For a moment, she thought about arguing, but she caught her reflection in the polished floor. Tired eyes, a faint scar that ran along her collarbone. And she remembered her training: control your breathing, keep your voice calm. She gave a small nod and walked toward the back of the plane. Passengers in first class watched her leave with dismissive glances. To them, she was just a woman out of place, someone who didn't belong in their circle of champagne and fine suits. As she bent down to tuck her jacket into the overhead bin, the edge slipped. For the first time in years, the ink etched across her back was visible: a trident, dagger, an eagle, symbols few would ever recognize. But those who did, froze. The tattoo of a U.S. Navy SEAL. The man who noticed first wasn't a passenger. It was the pilot himself, walking the aisle to check on his crew before takeoff. He stopped cold, his eyes locking on the mark. His breath caught, memories flooding back like a wave: dust, fire, and the desperate voice of a radio operator calling for air support. He had been there, and someone like her had saved his life. The pilot's footsteps faltered. For a moment, he forgot where he was: the polished floor of a jet, the hum of boarding announcements. All he could see was the desert sky, years ago, when his aircraft had nearly been blown out of the sky. Back then, they were just voices over a radio. A SEAL unit holding the line, refusing to fall back, giving him precious minutes to make it out alive. He never saw their faces. But he never forgot their courage. And now, right in front of him, the mark. He stepped forward, clearing his throat. The flight attendant turned, startled. "Captain, I was just... Is there a problem here?" His voice was calm but sharp, the kind of tone that made people stand straighter. The attendant hesitated. "This passenger doesn't appear to fit first-class requirements. I was moving her to economy." The pilot's gaze dropped to the ticket still clutched in the woman's hand. He studied her. Ordinary clothes, yes. But nothing about her was ordinary. He could see the posture, the restraint, the way she carried herself with quiet discipline. "Is that correct?" he asked her gently. She lifted her chin, her voice even. "I paid for first class. But if it's easier for your crew, I'll sit in the back." The pilot shook his head slowly, his throat tightening. He glanced again at her back, the unmistakable tattoo that meant more than money, more than appearances. It meant service, sacrifice, family. "Miss," he said, his voice breaking the tense silence, "you don't move to the back of this plane. Not today. Not ever." The flight attendant blinked, confused. "Captain." The pilot turned, his expression unyielding. "Do you know what that tattoo means?" Passengers shifted, curiosity sparking. The attendant stammered. "No, sir. That," the pilot said, pointing gently toward her, "is the mark of a Navy SEAL. The only people who earn it are the ones who fight so the rest of us can live free. People who would give their lives without hesitation, so you and I could stand here." The hush fell over the cabin. The woman shifted uncomfortably, not used to recognition. She whispered, "Sir, please, you don't have to." But the pilot raised his voice slightly, enough for those in first class to hear. When I was stranded overseas, under fire, it was a SEAL team that answered my call. I never saw their faces, but they saved my life. And if you think for 1 second that someone with that mark doesn't belong in first class, then you don't understand what it means to have earned it. The flight attendant paled, eyes widening. Around them, passengers who had dismissed her earlier now stared with something new in their eyes: shame, respect, awe. The pilot placed a hand over his heart. On this flight, this woman doesn't sit in the back. She sits where she wants. And as far as I'm concerned, she belongs at the very front. Her throat tightened. For years, she had lived in silence, her battles known only to her teammates. She had never asked for recognition, never wanted it. But in that moment, every sacrifice she had carried alone suddenly felt seen. The crew scrambled to make things right. The flight attendant who had dismissed her earlier now bowed her head, fumbling to guide her back toward the first-class cabin. But the woman moved slowly, her steps hesitant. Recognition had never been her goal. She remembered faces, her brothers, her sisters, those who hadn't come home. The tattoo wasn't just ink. It was a memorial carved into her skin, a reminder she carried every day. She wasn't here for praise, but for them. The pilot walked beside her, shielding her from the stares. I don't know your name, he said softly. But I owe you more than I can ever say. Her eyes glistened. She gave him a small nod. Then honor them, she whispered. The ones who didn't make it back. That's who you owe. He swallowed hard, nodding. I will. When she reached her seat, first-class passengers who had once looked at her with disdain now stood as she passed. Not in mockery this time. Not in judgment, but in silent respect, heads bowing slightly, eyes softening. She sat down, pulling her jacket back over her shoulders to cover the tattoo. She didn't want glory. All she wanted was peace. The cabin door closed, and the plane hummed with power. As it lifted into the night sky, the city lights vanished beneath the clouds. She leaned against the window, breathing slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. In the quiet, she thought of her team, those who laughed beside her in the mud, who shared their last rations, who held the line when the world turned dark. She thought of how many times they had been told they didn't belong, how many times the world had overlooked them. And she thought of how, tonight, a simple moment had made them visible again. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. His tone was steady, but everyone could hear the weight in it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. Tonight's flight is special. We have among us a passenger who represents the very best of what it means to serve. She won't want me to say her name, but I'll say this: sometimes heroes walk quietly among us. Tonight, one of them sits here. The cabin fell silent. A few passengers placed hands over their hearts. Others wiped away tears they didn't expect. The woman closed her eyes. She didn't need applause. She didn't need thanks. What mattered was that, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly across the sky. And in the hum of the engines, she felt something she hadn't in years. Belonging. And so, the woman who had been pushed aside, doubted, and dismissed for not looking the part, sat in silence at the front of the plane, her story unspoken but understood. She didn't ask for respect. She didn't demand recognition, yet the mark on her back told the truth louder than words ever could. Heroes don't always wear uniforms in public. They walk beside us in airports, in streets, in silence. But when the truth is revealed, the world stops and remembers. If this story moved you, if it made you pause and think of the sacrifices carried by those we never see, like, comment, and subscribe. Share it so that the world remembers. Respect is not about appearances, but about the lives lived in service and sacrifice.